welcome everyone. My name is Melissa Bostrom. I'm the Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Professional Development in the Graduate School, and I'm really pleased to welcome you here today for our panel discussion, an insider's view, a panel discussion with human resources managers. And in just a moment, I'm going to introduce our panelists. This event is part of the year-long Careers Beyond Academia series that is co-sponsored with the Office of Postdoctoral Services and the Duke Career Center. And so if this is the first event that you're joining us for, I hope you'll check out the website to see what other events are coming up for those of you exploring broad career options. So let me turn our attention now to our panel. So starting from the my far right, your far left, Laura Jones is the lead staffing specialist at the US EPA. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Bob Miles is the Senior Recruiting Consultant for Strategic Talent Management at RTI International. Welcome. Michael Burney is Senior Talent Acquisition Specialist at SAS. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
And Jessica Saunders is the Senior Associate Talent Acquisition Specialist at SAS. So we're very pleased to welcome them all here today. I have questions that you all have submitted ahead of time. And so we're going to start with those kind of structured questions to get the conversation going, and then we'll kind of turn things over to the audience for some questions towards the end. So to get started, I'm going to ask each of our panelists, what are your areas of specialization as a recruiter? Tell us a little bit about what's in your portfolio at any one time, how many positions are you recruiting for, about how many applications do you get for kind of a typical position that's in your portfolio, and what kinds of things get your attention in the application materials that you receive. And I'm going to start with Laura this time, but we'll rotate.
All right. Again, I'm Laura Jones. I'm with the EPA. Answering this question is probably the first thing that will point out differences in federal hiring versus private sector hiring. We don't focus on any particular kind of job. We focus on customers within our organization. So I actually am now a branch chief, and I supervise a group that does staffing for our research group and also one of our regulatory science, pesticides, toxics groups. We provide classification, staffing, recruitment, and personnel processing for those groups. As a whole agency, we currently have about 900 jobs somewhere in the hiring process, whether it's getting ready to recruit or out on the street. And we get around 8,500 applications every month, and that's an average about 70 per job that we look at. The things that get my attention, HR is split from the hiring manager, so we're the ones responsible for determining if you're eligible and qualified, but the hiring manager is the one who decides if you get an interview. For my part in HR, what gets my attention is a neat, well-organized, thorough application.
Okay. So I work at RTI, and I currently support our health solutions organization and all of our laboratory sciences. So I look for all of the lab-based positions. It could be anything from drug discovery, toxicology, energy, thermoelectrics, you name it. If there's a lab, I'm looking for those types of folks. The health solutions side of things is pharmaceutical consulting. It's not clinical trials, it's more on the health economics side, patient-reported outcomes, and that type of non-lab-based research. So from an attention point of view, it's really with RTI, we're a government contractor, so we have pretty strong rules to follow as far as our recruiting goes, and one of which is we're not allowed to forward a resume to a hiring manager unless they meet the qualifications. And as you can imagine, we see a lot of those that don't. So the biggest thing that jumps out to me is to make sure you're applying to jobs that you're qualified for, because there's just no way around it with a government contractor. If you're applying to drug discovery and your background's in something completely different, there's not a cover letter in the world that's going to change that. It has to meet the requirements. So being very specific to what you're applying to, not clicking the apply all in that type of situation. And then from a volume perspective, it varies greatly. I have some jobs that if I post them, I'll have 100 resumes within a week, and others I won't have any. And I have to go out and find the people depending on the technology. So it's a big variance there.
And I would, and by the way, my name's Mike. I'm from SAS. I've been at SAS for 4 years, but some similar comments to Bob is my feedback as well. For us, it's about having, since most of my positions are technical in nature, developers, PhD statisticians, we are a government contractor as well. It's really about having the requirements at a baseline for the position you're applying for. I know that sounds obvious, but sometimes if you're on the fence, it's really good to kind of dissect that job description and make sure that you do meet the essential qualifications. So primarily I'm working again on software developer positions, application developers, engineers, data scientists, and I support our cloud division at SAS. But I think what can make you stand out, especially in a resume, is just covering your technical areas of expertise.
So again, I'm Jessica Saunders. I'm on the team at SAS with Mike. I support a wide array of positions, but mainly in marketing, a lot of marketing, internal comms, external comms, product management, and also a division that sits within SAS called Jump, which is, I like to say, its own mini company within SAS. So for that, I recruit everything from inside sales through principal software developers. So they're a small group, but they have every type of position under the sun. For me, a resume that stands out is something that's concise. I am looking at a resume for not as much time as I would like, but because of the volume, I like things that, if there's something in the job description that's an essential, bring it to my attention. Have it clear and simple for me to read, because I'm not somebody that's in that technology or in that job, but I need to be able to decipher immediately whether you're qualified or not. So bring things to the top of the resume and make things, simplify things down, and maybe have a longer resume you can bring into an interview or speak to in an interview. So that's something that personally I really like to see.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with Bob this time.
Okay.
All right, so tell us a little bit about what role technology plays in the application process, and does that have any implications for the way candidates should prepare their materials?
For us, currently, no, because we don't get the high volume that some larger companies do, so we really do look at every single resume. In some larger companies, they use technology to parse it down and maybe do the screening for you, but it really doesn't play that big a factor in ours today. Not to say it won't in the future as we grow, but.
Mike or Jessica?
We do leverage technology pretty heavily. We just invested in a new applicant tracking system that we just kicked off about 2 months ago. And it is exactly within mind to leverage technology to help us go through our candidate pool. And that's why, when I said before, it's really important to be very clear about what you can bring to the table in a resume. We don't necessarily spend a lot of time or any time looking at cover letters. I know that's a topic today. So we really have to, we call it the elevator pitch. You've got about 5 to 10 seconds, maybe less sometimes, once you get through our screening process. It's not a hefty screening process. We do want to look at a lot of resumes, but we leverage our technology quite a bit to not only provide us analytics, we're an analytics company, about the candidates we're receiving, where they're coming from, what backgrounds they have at a flash point in a few seconds. So we're getting a lot of data up front before I even open your resume. So once I get there, you got a few seconds because I've already spent some time on the front end doing some of that work with our technology.
Can I piggyback that? If we receive nearly the volume that SAS received, we would have technology, but we don't get that volume.
And I should say, to your earlier point, when I first joined SAS, I have a recruiting background. I thought, oh, I'm going to be going through thousands and thousands of resumes. And as emerging technologies are coming out with cloud and big data and analytics, there might only be 20 or 30 candidates in the United States that have that skill set. Some skill sets aren't being taught right now in universities yet, but are starting to be. So candidates don't have 2 years of experience in these areas. They're just not out there. So we do get some job descriptions where we'll see 150 to 200 to 300 candidates, and then some where I see 6. So it's changing a little bit, and we are leveraging technology to help with that.
Yeah, I think as an applicant in the process, something that you can see that will kind of tell you what our technology is doing on the background is the screening questions. So if there's a screening question and you answer no, I'm not going to guarantee you, but I will tell you that probably means you aren't qualified for the job, or you're not going to be moving forward. Sometimes I know that some companies use screening questions to kind of set people apart. Do you have this golden egg that we're looking for in this resume, and so maybe that's not the case. But if I am filling out an application that says, do you have programming experience, and I say no, they're probably looking for programming experience, and you're probably not going to make it through that first wave of applicants, to be honest. And sometimes I go back if I don't have large candidate pools, and I kind of pull people from that status, but just kind of use the application as triggers of maybe what they're looking for. A lot of companies are kind of paring down their screening questions. I know we are, to try to spend more time looking at individual resumes, but that to me is a really good thing to look at to see, okay, what is their technology going to screen me out for? It's these screening questions that I'm answering, because those are really easy for ISIMs, or what we use to say, okay, these people don't have this, put them in a separate bucket, and we're not even probably going to look at them.
And we can actually use our technology that we have now to keyword search and scrape out really good candidates without actually having to go into the system. So we can actually see if we have 200 applicants and I'm looking for a very niche technology or educational background, I can actually narrow that search by leveraging our technology. Now, we are government contractors, so we have a lot of training around how to use that, how not to use that. We do archive all of our searches for compliance, but we're able to be a little flexible in how we search. So even if you don't get through for one of these questions, we're not really adding a lot. It's just really the foundational knowledge that gets you past that stage. And if you really stand out, we'll actually data mine our own data now to find you. So we're spending more time with our own applicants to try to find the best of the best. So put those keywords in your resumes.
Yeah, so we're the federal government. So we do use technology. In fact, all of our jobs you have to apply online. usajobs.gov is the government's website. That's not just EPA, that's most federal agencies. And we also have a partner system that we use to receive applications and to view your documents that you upload. But despite many, many rumors, we look at all of our resumes manually. There is a person opening every document you submit, looking at it, and determining whether or not you're qualified. We also, so speaking of screening questions, we have screening questions that can screen you out so that we don't ever look at you. So it's the same thing that you just said. If there's a question that says, do you have this experience as required in the vacancy announcement, and you say no, you're probably not going to have your resume looked at. But we really do look at everything you submit, do everything we can to make sure that even if you've got this experience for the job buried somewhere in your resume, it's going to count and qualify you for the job. We, however, love it, again, if you can put that front center, just like all of you have said, and make sure that it's clear why you're qualified for the job. Government has a lot of little micro rules too, so read those vacancy announcements carefully. It can't just be experience because you did a publication on it. It has to be a year of duties, tasks, experience at a certain level that qualify you for the job.
And I think you're not going to set yourself up as a candidate very well if you answer one of those very specific questions. For example, it could be a domain. It could be, have you ever worked in the pharmaceutical industry before, working on a very specific project? You say yes because you wrote a paper on it or took a course on it. Once you get to that interview, you're not doing those hiring managers are really quickly going to know if you did or you didn't. So think about that question. What are they trying to get from me? Do they want to know that I've ever seen it, or have I actually applied the knowledge in an area like an internship, or worked at a company, or really worked on a hard project for a long time? We're a software company, so candidates all the time will say, I have SaaS experience. And you're in a room full of SaaS experts, you don't want to say that unless you have SaaS experience. So we always, when we do a lot of candidate training, we try to prepare them. If you say you know SaaS and one of the 250 plus solutions, you should probably know it pretty well to answer some questions about it.
Yeah, we have some checks and balances for that too. We have a questionnaire that's supposedly designed to set candidates apart, to give you the highly qualified candidates and the less qualified candidates. But again, we're reviewing your resumes. If your resume doesn't prove that those answers were correct, then you still won't make it past that first pool.
Yeah, and going back to Michael's point about the cover letters, my philosophy is that if they don't ask for it, don't include it.
Don't worry about it.
Nobody's reading it, unless they ask for it. With a job specific that has writing responsibilities,
Right.
they'll ask for it because they want to see a writing sample. But
Mhm.
otherwise, I know a lot of people that spend a lot of time crafting a cover letter and it's not being read, so it's a waste of time.
We aren't taking them anymore in our applicant tracking system. So candidates say, there's no place to upload my cover letter because we aren't accepting them. So we'll help you out there.
Can I just ask a related
Sure.
question? So what if they actually do have a field for you to upload, but they don't make it mandatory?
Don't do it.
Don't.
It's a waste of time.
You know, our hiring managers might read them, but it's not gonna, I don't think it would make or break your application.
Yeah, it won't make or break, but it's just, I just view it as a waste of time because it's not being read, it's not going to influence the decision either way.
You can put some of that information in, like your objective on your resume too, if you really are, think it would help.
And if you do include one, make it very brief. Philosophy on cover letters, the longer the cover letter, the less likely you are to be qualified for the job because you're taking a lot of time to
Sally?
draw a conclusion and sell that point. So make it very brief to the point.
Can we circle back to one of the comments that was brought up, and that is experience? What counts as years of experience? I know that's farther down our list, but it seems like a relevant topic to bring up here. So several of you kind of talked a little bit about what counts as experience in your context. Maybe starting with SAS folks, can you tell us a little bit more? Mike, you said not just a publication, not just taking a class, maybe, but what actually constitutes 1 year of experience, 2 years of experience, especially for a room full of folks who might be working in a lab full time
Yep.
during their graduate school or postdoc experience.
So Jessica and I were talking about this. We're going through an evolution at SAS. We've been around, our company's been around 40 years, but we're really doing a lot of change in the way we recruit talent. And one of the things that I think is refreshing is we're actually trying to go away from the years of experience. We're trying to go away from focusing on must-have 5 years of experience. We really want to focus more on the picture and the story of the candidate. So it's a great question about you did work in a lab. If that's directly related to what we need you to do for a customer or on-site, and it's a more of a junior level position, we do probably want to know that if it applies to the job. So I won't say gone are the days at SAS of seeing you must have 5 years of this, 2 years of this, 3 years of this. You still will see it on some postings if it's just a hard and fast, you can't do this job day one without it. But we're trying to move that towards competency-based job descriptions. Are you able to, ability with, those kind of words, knowledge of, instead of you must have 5 years of this. Because we're missing out on really good candidates that might have 4.5, that might not realize that my master's and my PhD will count towards a great deal of experience, and maybe that does in someone's mind equal 5 years of experience, not 3. So we came from an environment where if you had to answer this question the way we did it a year ago, we would say if you had 3 years of experience and a master's, you actually probably had about 5 years of experience. So that was kind of the old way we used to do it. I still would say this is a good way to think about it. Your master's and your PhDs will get you extra years of experience, but we look at it more, and Jessica, if you want to segue off this, as a competency, not a hard and fast requirement.
Yeah, I think something to look for, I know in ours and other job descriptions, is a lot of times hidden at the bottom in the small text that no one reads, including me. It might say education or a combination of experience will kind of attribute to what we're looking for. And I don't remember the exact line that we have, but we put that in almost all of our descriptions to give us the flexibility to really find a candidate that fits the culture and the niche for this particular team and this particular job. And I would look for that because sometimes it won't be included, and that means if you do not have 3 years of experience directly related to this, we cannot consider you because of what the team needs for this particular position. But internship experience, lab experience, that is all incredibly valuable experience that you have, and tell us about it, because if you've been doing that in school, I hope that's what you're passionate about and that's what you want to find a job in. So tell us that story of what you've been doing, and it really is such good experience. I would hate that does count. That's a question. It does count for sure, and we really like to see that because students who are involved during school, that's something that stands apart.
To my earlier point, some technologies haven't been out very long, and we always call it they learned in their mom's basement or learned in a lab. Some of these technologies are just starting to be taught at universities, or certifications, or courses that in work that you can do outside of a university setting, there are some of that self-study stuff, or stuff you do on your spare time and you're learning technologies on your own. We're a technology software company, so if we see that mentioned, I developed my own application that did this, that has really nothing to do with your hard and fast resume, right? Your education, you did it on your own. You know, sometimes people will put that in the cover letter. I say put it in a resume if it applies to the job. If it's an applications developer job, talk about some applications you built on your own time. So we're looking for the total picture because we post most of our positions what we call levelless, most of the time, not all the time, where we'll hire anyone at any level. So we just want our managers to find the right person, and then we'll figure it out.
Yeah, and going back to the lab discussion, if they're looking for, and we steer away from the years on maybe instrumentation, so like mass spectrometry, if we're looking for someone with demonstrated expertise, you want to make sure that's in the resume, so you don't want to use the same resume for every job you're applying to, but you don't just want to have the LCMS at the top of your resume. You want to have something up there that says you're fluent and you're able to use that well, because otherwise you're going to get overlooked. So, and it could be 1 year, 3 years, doesn't matter. If you learned it well within 1 year, you demonstrated the expertise, make sure it's on there.
So we're the federal government. And everything is heavily regulated with a purpose, fairness in hiring, not discriminating, making sure you get qualified candidates, equal pay for equal work. All of these things are sort of tenets that we must live by. There are all sorts of factors, and I could go into a lot of granular detail, but that's probably, if any of you want to talk to me about your particular situation afterwards, I'm happy to answer questions. But you're looking at the grade that the job is posted at. That will make a difference. Some grades you can substitute education for experience, and some you can't. And it will say that in the vacancy announcement. But the government is always looking for, if education is not a way to qualify, they're looking for a year of what's called specialized experience. And specialized experience has to be at the next lower grade level or equivalent to it. And where that really comes in and becomes a problem, I assume most of you are in the process of getting your PhD, is that right? So a PhD in a research field will qualify you for a GS-12, right? But if you're trying to qualify based on experience gained while you were getting your PhD is not qualifying for the next higher level, that 13, because you don't have the PhD yet, which is really sort of this massive craziness that is hard for people to understand. But that's why I say if you have specific questions, let me know.
So would postdoc years as practice experience for all
Yes,
of this? Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And so for the government, postdoc years would count towards the GS-13, right? They would count as years of GS-12 experience.
So, your follow-up question?
How about multiple positions within the same company? Sometimes there'll be like 2 or 3 open positions that I feel like I'm qualified for.
Apply to them all.
The question just for the recording was, what if there are 2 or 3 positions within the same company? Should we apply to
Just
them?
don't apply to 50.
Yeah, unless you're qualified for 50.
Unless you're qualified for 50,
Yes.
and you know, it's at SAS we just have such a variance of types of jobs. You know, we could be hiring a data scientist, a software developer, a marketing professional, because we have a whole infrastructure on our campus, and we see people who apply. You know, they just apply to all, and I think the person might think I'm getting more exposure, right, by volume. No, you're just really diluting your chances, because do you really want to be a data scientist? Because you applied to a marketing job and an HR job, and I'm not sure you just don't want to get into the company. So be careful about that, and if you qualify, apply. If you're on the fence, like we talked about before, don't apply. I mean, really focus on the ones that you want, right, you're passionate about, because that's going to come out in your phone interviews or your face-to-face interviews anyway. If you don't have a passion for it, it's just to get into one of the organizations we represent, it's going to come out. You know? Yeah, be patient.
Our applications can be a little tedious, so you don't want to waste your time, you know, applying for something you're not qualified for.
But if you are qualified, to your point with the 3, if I see you in, job 1, and I think you're good for job 2, if they're completely different jobs, but you're qualified for both, I can't move you. So what I would have to do in that case would call you and say, hey, you're not really a good fit for that one, but why don't you go back and apply? So if you see it, definitely apply, because they're not going to move you back and forth. We're not allowed to. You have to apply.
Yeah, I know that Mike and I have had the situation where we were, fighting over the same candidate because we support, like we're both hiring for, I don't even remember what it was, but I think the software developer or something, and it's two totally different groups. And we both made him the same offer for both jobs and let him pick. But I mean, so that he went and applied for both of the jobs, and lucky him, he got 2 offers and at the same time. So don't, because especially in large organizations, they have so many different groups that each need maybe the same type of job. So if they're both open at the same time, let Mike and I fight about it and just apply to them both.
Same thing, we're split into business units, but each unit has finance. So I may be recruiting for a financial analyst, my peer may be doing the same, another peer. So we could have 4 recruiters recruiting for financial analysts at the same time. Not entirely efficient, soon to be changing, but that's the way it exists now. So you want to make sure you're being seen, not assuming that one recruiter has all 4 jobs. They're different business units.
Yeah, and we do leverage our technology to Bob's earlier point. We leverage our technology to use the feature of inviting you to apply to another job. But you're asking the recruiter to do a lot of work on your behalf, and we have a lot of volume of applicants to look at. We're representing our companies, we're not agencies, so we're not going to work for you, but there are cases where you might have a really good specialization. I might see you on a job. I can actually use our technology to invite you with 1 or 2 clicks to go apply to another job, and I don't have to do that much work to do that, but if I had to do that a lot of times, it's not going to be great. So you want to be your own kind of representative in that respect. I mean, we can do that, and like I said before, mine our own data and try to find these specialized folks. But for compliance reasons, we have to go out and invite you to apply. And that adds another layer of communication. If you don't get the email, if you missed my call, you're just not doing yourself very good there. So.
Since we are talking about technology here, can you briefly tell how does your technology works and how best we can tailor our resumes for this technology so that we can get better opportunities to be paid?
I think it's one of my biggest pet peeves is people that don't read the job description and apply to jobs. And I'll put an example on that. I currently have a project manager position open for someone within a forensic scientist group. So it's a project manager, it says in the title, forensic sciences. 90% of the resumes I'm seeing in there are IT project managers that never took a science course. So they're seeing project manager, they're applying, they're not reading the description. So the best way to get seen into the job you're interested in is to make sure you're reading the description and applying to the jobs that line up with your experience. That's the only way.
I would say, I always tell people, people ask me, you look at resumes all day, can you look at my resume? Something that this is totally a personal thing, but what I like to do is I pull the skills section where you list out your skills. It's normally at the bottom. I have that at the top of my resume. So I have the 6 or I think it's 8, softwares that I use every day in my job at the top of my resume, and especially in technology fields, if you have experience in cloud, in SaaS or Jump or anything, you put that at the very top. Like I said before, you see it immediately and you know that you can explain that later down in your resume of what that specific technology is, how you used it and for how long. But if I see that right away, it's going to, I always get really excited when I see people with the specific technology that's applied to the job. I see that you looked at the posting, I see that you pulled that out and put that at the top of your resume. You're going to be one of my favorite candidates for that role because, I know that you know what we're looking for, and then you spend the time later in your resume actually explaining how and why you know that technology.
And another thing I would say to that too, and we're doing this now in our organization, is we call it industry appropriate job titles. So SaaS, and I'm sure RTI and every other company out there, we call things different things, right? SaaS calls them software developers, Google might call them software engineers, or something completely different. And I always tell my hiring managers, right, but when we post it, nobody knows what that is. That's an insider term. We're not going to get any candidates who understand that. I would flip that to candidates. So I would say, if you're creating a resume for a technical consultant position, you look at the job description and you're, that's me. I can do that job. But your job titles, are very unique to your current organization, or you don't really have a specific job title. You have some companies will say you have some flexibility there, but they have like an internal job description. We're similar to that. You really want to tailor it to the company. Do some research. You want to tailor, go on LinkedIn and find out other people that have that job maybe, and not change your title, but AKA. So I'm a software engineer, but I'm an applications developer, something. You're applying to an applications developer position. That really helps recruiters, because I look at titles. I look at companies' titles, your skills, softwares you've used, all right at the top. I'm skimming through. If I open up a project manager resume and a software developer job, that took me 1 second. I'm going to the next, because that is not a skill set match. So.
I'm actually talking about the technology that you're using to screen the application out front. How do you actually make your resume more easily, better screening for your...
Still aligned.
Yeah, I mean, there's...
Keywords.
Yeah, and regarding our technology is, maybe one day will be this smart, but it's not really mining your resume when you apply. It's really some of those questions we talked about earlier, your basic experience. And I think Jessica made the point earlier, if you're reading a few of these questions, like have you ever worked with, do you have experience in, and you're just saying no all the time, that is not the right job for you. I think it'll be very clear. If you read the essential requirements, especially for government contract jobs and government jobs, and you don't meet most of those essential requirements, or even one, you're not going to be seen. So regarding the resume, the technology's not there yet. It might be soon, where it's going to scrape it. A person's still looking at that. But I would say to get into the system, regarding Microsoft Word, PDF, use some of those things. I know sometimes people will put them in like Notepad or HTML, and systems, not every system can read that regarding formatting. So recruiters are going to see a jumbled mess. And now, even though it's not your fault, I'm on to the next. Because I don't want to decipher that or send that to my hiring manager in a mess, when you probably didn't submit a mess. But hopefully that answers more of the technology side.
I see a lot of people do bolded words in their resume, like in the descriptions, because they're keywords in the job description. That is great that those words are in there, but if there's a bunch of bolded stuff in there, that's not helping the system find those words and passing you through to me. It's like, it kind of, that's not doing a lot of good. I've actually seen that online, like bold keywords, or I had a professor early in college say, bold the keywords from the resumes, and that way you can get through the system. And now being on the other side, I'm like, I don't even know what that meant. That doesn't work.
It just makes your resume look a little silly when we forward it through the system. And a lot of hiring managers that even some of mine that are very technical, that aren't in communications or technical writing, they'll say, this resume is a mess. They misspelling, why is this bolded, why is this, but you were just trying to, kind of game the system a little bit. Always keep in mind that until we hit some future date, humans are looking at this. People are looking at this, and what I said earlier is really true. You have to tell your story very quickly. And if that story is a mess in formatting, that might speak to you as a candidate, and unintentionally. That you don't pay attention to detail. Why is this bolded? Why is this?
People make assumptions about that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And the reality is, if you meet the qualifications by law, your resume will go through to the hiring manager.
Right.
So you want it to look, professional and clear for that hiring manager. For HR's sake, at least for us, we need specific dates so we can determine if you have a year of experience. We need specific duties so we can determine, that experience is qualifying, that kind of thing.
And also, I would say, like we mentioned some different formats, like Word and PDF, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, are typically tend to be the safest bet. I keep my resume in a PDF 24/7 because I know that no system can screw that up. No system, nobody can hit enter and then my name, you know how resumes are, one space can screw up the whole thing because it puts you on another page. So I keep mine in a PDF. Some systems, it's harder for, I know ours, you upload your resume and it will parse your information, like your address, your name. And on PDFs, it doesn't do as well, to be honest. It doesn't parse as easily. But take the extra time. If you're, I tell people, and that's how I am, I use a PDF. I'll take the extra time to enter in my own name and address. But I know when the recruiter's looking at their resume on the other end that it looks exactly like what I see. And there's nobody that can mess it up.
And a readable PDF, too, is very easy now.
For the next question, I'm going to start with Laura.
All right.
So, a lot of times, graduate students and postdocs have the question, what if I see a job that looks interesting, that I think I might enjoy, but it only requires a bachelor's degree? And I am going to have a master's degree or a PhD, or I'm a postdoc now and I have that experience. Am I too overqualified to apply for that job?
So the short answer is no. If you're interested in working for EPA or wherever, I would say, of course, apply, even if you think you're overqualified. I'm going to try and keep this as brief as possible, but there are a bunch of different ways education plays into the hiring process in the government. One is that probably the job series or occupational groups that you guys will be applying to require education just to get into the series. And that is just a bachelor's or equivalent. But then, as I said before, there's also ways that you can qualify for higher grades based on higher degrees that you've got. So you may see both things in a vacancy announcement, and that's the difference. You need the bachelor's to qualify for the series and the higher degree to qualify for the grade. So if you see something posted at a GS7 or a GS9 and you really want to get into the government or the EPA in particular, absolutely apply. Your PhD probably only helps you in that case.
And we going back to the point on the requirements, if you meet the requirements, which a bachelor's would, you'll be forwarded through. We have to screen everyone that does meet the requirements, so I can't remove you from a bachelor's level job because you have a PhD, but what I'm going to call you and explain the role, the pay, and then it's up to you whether you're interested in that job. In some cases, people are interested, in others, it's not what they want to do because they're at a more advanced level. But you'll go through, and in fewer cases, I mean, it does happen. There might be something coming down the road that would fit in the line, and we'll just keep the conversation going until that happens.
Do you want to?
Yeah.
That's similar to our response. Great response on that.
Yeah, I would say, like again, Mike and I kind of talked about this yesterday, is first, make sure that this job is going to be fulfilling for you. So that might be something that you don't get to assess until you get to an interview process, but if you just finished a PhD program and this job requires a bachelor's and 2 years of experience, and you obviously have those two things, but make sure that, I know as recruiters we are going to be gunning to make sure that you're going to be happy in the job, but make sure that it's something that's going to be challenging, fulfilling for you, and have a realistic expectation of what that job is going to pay. So do research on that. I know that's a later question, kind of, but just be realistic. And you're interviewing the company about the role and who they are just as much as we're interviewing you most of the time. So apply for the job, but really think about, make sure the job is going to be fulfilling and challenging and exciting for you, not just that you get a job, because ultimately we want you to get a job and stay in it and grow and be happy there.
I'd say 99 out of 100 people that just completed their PhD are not going to be happy in an entry-level, bachelor's level job.
Yep. Yeah, and sometimes we'll put master's as a requirement, and then if you go to the preferences, it'll say PhD in a similar field. To your point earlier, we're not on that grade, but in a similar thought process is my hiring managers and myself, we're going to look at that and we're going to go, oh wow, that's a plus. So that's a preference. That's a kicker, I call it. So that's going to put you up on that list. You may be in contention with a lot of other people that just have their masters, but they may have 10 years of experience. So, but you're going to probably get in that crowd a little bit. So you really have to understand, is it meeting your expectations? Because salary is going to be impacted by that on the grade or structure. But we do see that. I wouldn't say as much with bachelors and someone having a PhD, but if a master's is required, we don't need a PhD, and if you have it, it's just going to make you kind of go up on that list a little bit. I do find, though, that when a bachelor's is required and a PhD applies, I often, as a recruiter, want to know why. So I'll reverse it and say, why are they applying for this? If I can read your resume and it makes sense to me and that story I've been talking about, then I don't have any more questions. If your resume isn't lining up, I'm going to, again, as a recruiter, I'm going to think, is this really the job you want, or do you want the company? And we struggle with that as recruiters. So you're going to have to work for a hiring manager in a department, even if you work for a big company. NSAS is great reputation, I always wanted to work there, but at the end of the day, you are working for a manager in a department, and that is most of your 9 to 5 day. You're supporting the overall organization, but you need to be happy in that job, and we have a lot of struggles with that. Is we talk to our candidates when we meet them in HR about their motivators. Why do you want this job? Is it right for you? So we've been flipping it to our candidates for them to interview us more often now. So that's another change we've been going through, and it's helped a lot. So I would kind of say along that your motivators have to align too.
Thank you. I'm going to to start with Bob this time. So what are the opportunities for internationals to be hired at your organization, and how do those opportunities compare with those for U.S. citizens? Are there things that internationals can do to increase their chances of being hired?
Yeah, so we're fortunate because we're nonprofit, so we don't have visa caps, and we're able to hire international students and support visas along the way, and eventually we go to green card processing as well. It really depends on the role in the organization. There are certain, for contractual obligations, you have to be a U.S. citizen. But I would say overall, if I handle 120 hires a year, 20 of them are probably sponsored, either students or through visa of some sort. So we're fortunate because it expands our talent pool. So,
Mike or Jessica?
I probably sponsor more than most because I'm in emerging technology areas. So for us, I couldn't give you an exact percentage. Maybe it's similar to your numbers. We would sponsor in the cases where the technology or the PhD specialization or industry experience is very hard to find. Otherwise, we probably will not. In roles where bachelors are required, IT-related roles, HR, marketing, you probably won't see those sponsoring visas. In statistical areas, data science, advanced data science, masters and above, we might. It's not something we do a lot, but I certainly do throughout the year sponsor visas. But it's going to be about the specialization and the technologies that person has, because at the end of the day, we have to justify that when we go through visa process.
right.
Can we not find the talent in the U.S.? Is it not here? Is it harder to find in the U.S.? There is an entire government-mandated process around that we have to be very careful of. So typically we are hiring someone with a very, very specialized background.
I would say for us, all I would say is to look in the bottom of that tiny font, like I mentioned before, because a lot of times if we are going to sponsor a visa, or we think we might, it will say in there, it will not say you must be
U.S. citizen.
a U.S. citizen or not require visa sponsorship. So if you think, oh, this might be one that sponsors visa, look in that small font.
Mhm.
So we're the federal government. For the most part, we have to hire U.S. citizens only. It has to do with immigration law and appropriated funds, so what we can spend appropriated funds on, who we can spend it on. But there is a cool exception that's great for this group, which is our postdoc program. So the Office of Research and Development, which is a sub-organization of EPA, doing research, it's almost an academic model of research. They have a postdoc program. They're usually hired at the GS-12, again, people just out of their PhDs, and they can hire non-citizens. These are temporary appointments, and if you are not a citizen at the end of that temporary appointment, you can't then be, appointed back into the government in a permanent job. But the postdoc program is a really cool way to get some EPA experience and work in that field. They're also a little bit easier to apply to. So they're posted on USA Jobs, but you email your application to a group box. So.
And we are subject to the cap because we're private. So we are subject to the U.S. cap for visas that does fill up very quickly. So we are pretty proactive. We also help with green cards quicker than a lot of other companies. And that is motivated, again, by the need for talent with specialized areas of skill sets and education. So we are subject to that cap. We keep our eye on it. We do try to be experts on visas so we can help our new hires through the process. It is a very complicated process. Some of you might know. But we are certainly, we have someone in our department, and that's her job, immigration. So.
Rumor has it when you finish your postdoc at the EPA, a lot of people come over. Yeah.
I'm not surprised. Not surprised.
Heard that before.
So our next question, I think we'll start with either Mike or Jessica from SAS, is about salary. So this is a little bit tricky when you're leaving a graduate student or postdoc role, and maybe the application process might ask, what's your current salary? And that's probably laughable. I hear some people laughing about it, right? And that might not align with what you're hoping to make in your next position. How do folks who are transitioning to maybe their first professional role outside of postdoc or graduate student role, how do they handle tricky issues of salary?
Carefully.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would say research. Research the company that you're talking with, because I would think that by the time you have to have this discussion, you know that you're going to have a phone screen or a phone interview, so you have time to do research. Be realistic and be honest. If you do have a salary, you could share that with the recruiter, but also kind of look. I hate to say it, Glassdoor is a great resource. I'll look on Glassdoor, do some research on what a realistic expectation is for that job. And we were talking about this yesterday, and it's hard, but I like the candidates share a range of what they are expecting. Obviously a recruiter knows you're just coming out of a PhD program, but it's okay to say, considering the experience I have and the education background, I'm looking for a range of X to X. And if that is something that's completely off from where we are, we will share that with you, hopefully immediately. I try to have that
Or
information.
by our expression.
Yeah, if we're silent on the phone, that might be because we're trying to catch our breath. But I always try to have the information of what a realistic salary range is. But when I'm talking to a candidate in front of me, and if I say, there's no way that is going to happen for this role, and I try to share, we don't really share ranges, but we can guide, we're looking a couple, lower than that. Are you comfortable? Tell me a little bit about kind of where you got your research, and that's okay to have an open dialogue, because we're not going to go back and share with the hiring manager what you said, but we just kind of need to know that we're in line with expectations from the get-go, so that we're not wasting time putting you on the phone with hiring managers, getting pumped about the job, getting the team excited about you, then going on in-person interviews, and then an offer comes and you're like, what the heck? This is not what I was looking for. Maybe it's a good thing, but maybe it would be higher than you're looking for. But I would definitely research and be realistic.
Yeah, and I would. My answer to this is, be careful about your approach. So one of the things recruiters, I don't want to speak for everyone, but that I really don't like from a candidate is the candidate telling me what they should make, based on. And I will say sometimes the way you approach the Glassdoor thing and research is, recruiters don't necessarily want to hear, I read online I should be asking for $95,000, or I heard this and I want this and I'm worth this. So my approach to this, to answer this, is be careful about how you're communicating that to a recruiter or even a hiring manager in some cases. We do not ask for it during your application. It's just a cultural thing. We don't ask for a range. We don't post a range. We just don't do it. We could. We just have always decided not to, because we don't want to miss out on a good candidate where you might not apply and we're off by a few $1,000s, but we have a great bonus, profit sharing, a great campus with things you may not even be educated on yet. So we at SAS, we definitely look at it as a holistic picture. I haven't had that chance to communicate that story to you yet, and you can do research online about the great things that we do offer that are very unique to our company. I do want to tell you that story, but don't come in and shoot yourself in the foot by saying to a recruiter who has the experience, I should make this, because it's not setting a good communication stage. And that might not be your personality, but you were coached. We find a lot of universities, not every universities, but some universities have programs, or someone went to a private program where a coach told them how to ask for it. And to us, it sounds coached. So we know it's not you. Maybe a parent or an advisor or an uncle said to say it. We can always tell it's coached. And we want to get past that, and we want to talk to you about, what do you really want to do for a living? Let's not focus on that right now. We understand everybody needs to make a living. We know our numbers a little bit in the back of our head. But we want to talk about some of the other things, what's important to you, why, what motivates you. Do you not care about retirement right now, but you really want to know more about daycare or subsidies in certain areas? So just be careful about how you approach it. Plenty of times I have PhDs or master's students say, I don't really know. And I've done this long enough to know, if you're coming out of a PhD program with no prior experience, that's okay. But understand that I'm going to go get my numbers, and I'm going to come back with what works for our organization based on our data, and at that point it might be a little bit odd if you say, well, that's way off my ideas. So just consistent conversation throughout. If you change your story, I'm going to talk to the hiring manager and we're going to say, they told me this number, they told you that number. So it's definitely about the way you decide to communicate it.
Yeah, well, the good news is that our salaries are set, and they're publicly available online. You can go look at them. They're the structure and the percentages were set in 1949 in the Classification Act of 1949. So it hasn't really changed since then, except for cost of living increases. what you'll see in a vacancy announcement is usually, there are 15 grades and each grade has 10 steps. So if you see a salary range in a vacancy announcement, it's representing step 1 to step 10 of that grade. Almost always you will be offered step 1. And in rare cases, they can set you at a higher step, but it's very specific circumstances. If you have a higher salary in a job offer or a current job that you're in, they can sometimes set you, but it's at the discretion of the hiring manager, so it's not a guarantee. But you know, if you look at the lowest range, the lowest number in that range, that's sort of your guaranteed starting point. The other thing to remember with federal jobs is that often they're in a career, what's called a career ladder, and as long as you're performing, you know, well, you will move up grades. So if you start at 11, you'll move up to 12 in a year and up to 13 a year after that. So you want to just not look at just that entry level number, but that what's called a full performance level grade. That's where your job is targeted to go. So it may start a little lower than you're expecting, but it ends up being a good thing.
Yeah, while ours aren't set in stone, we do operate with equity in mind. So as we look at a job offer, we're looking at comparable candidates or employees with similar backgrounds, and that's what's going to set the offer. So, you know, hypothetically speaking, if every postdoc's coming in at $50,000 a year, you're coming in at $50,000 a year, you know, because we can't give one person more or less, you know, just based on what they're commanding. And going back to the research, I'd be very careful in how you present the research. You know, salary.com is the one I'm always up against. I don't hear a lot of Glassdoor, but it's you're checking boxes, and it's going to drive you to a salary that you think you're worth. And what it does, you know, like I always use the example, I make a handful of international hires a year, meaning, you know, in other countries, not international from a visa, and it doesn't make me an international recruiter. But if I check that international box, my salary goes up 30 grand. So it sounds pretty good, but it's not so. So you just have to be careful as you're doing your research and you're checking boxes. Don't overinflate your salary commands when you're talking to folks, because it's easy to go up.
Yeah, and do the research. Jessica was saying, do the research on the company, because, you know, if we may not be a market leader in base salary, but does the other company offer a bonus? Do they offer profit sharing? Do they offer stock for a publicly traded company? So inexperienced candidates will just go to a number, a hard code. I saw 98,000, and 5 people posted somewhere between 95 and 98 for PhD with this and that. But they weren't from this company necessarily. They were from different companies. You know, that company doesn't offer this. So I don't want to have to, sometimes I have to educate a candidate. I don't want to feel like I'm lecturing them, but I would hate for them to go to a hiring manager and then have that kind of same communication, because our hiring managers are much more put off than we are on that. Because they hire a lot of people, and they know the salaries we normally bring people out, and they're like, why am I going to pay this person this, to your point, when I've paid the last 7 people in this range, and they have a similar background. So we have a lot of that knowledge already, and not to say you shouldn't negotiate or ask. That's okay for us to do to the recruiting folks and HR folks, but just be careful how you do it.
And I always say, if you're within what I call a closable gap, don't write it off just based on like $5,000. Because what you might learn is you go in and learn the benefits. SAS benefits are, you know, legendary locally. You got daycare center, the food is incredible. You have fitness centers, and, you know, everything's great. So there's a trade-off. And like in our case, we have an 8% retirement contribution. So you just hold yourself from process over $2,000 when your retirement contribution is greater than $2,000. So you want to look at the entire pictures. So if you're within that closable gap, continue to have the discussion, so that you don't make a decision before you know everything.
Yeah.
You know, it could be vacation time, flexible work, everything comes into play.
And it could show your attitude as a candidate, your personality, because we have candidates who ask for $2,000 more. We'll divide that by 12 months, because we're paid monthly. How much after taxes? You're not going to take this opportunity for that amount of money per paycheck, like $80, $50, whatever it is. So we always think of that magic number.
Yeah.
Why are you asking me?
Yeah,
why are you asking me for that? What's the motivators? And then does that translate into what kind of employee you're going to be? So you can take a lot from that. As you see, we do. We're analyzing people all the time. That's what we do for a living. And we're picking up on those cues. And we don't want, that's just a red flag. I mean, that's not, it's your money. but just be careful on how you make that. You don't want to take something and you really believe you're not being valued. Don't take the job.
Yeah.
But if it's a closable gap, that's a great way to put it. Ask.
Yeah, because quite frankly, I go back to when my daughter was young and I could have made more money, but if there was a school play at 9 a.m., I was there. If I had to leave at 2 to pick her up, I was there. There's the flexibility, and that was worth more than $10,000 because, you know, same thing, maybe my wife's job was a little more strict and her being able to leave. I could just get up, walk out, and my manager didn't think about it at all. So it's not always about money. There's flexibility, there's vacation, there's benefits, and you want to look at it all.
So on your point there, were you making the point, don't walk away if it's a closable gap, or don't sort of nickel and dime over a couple
I think you have to get the balance there.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, certainly, and I see you picking up on that, is I'm kind of saying both. Like I'm kind of negating it. You have to, it's not easy to do. It's not. And I understand if you haven't been through a lot of interviews, we've been on the other side so many times that a closable gap, and I don't want to give you a number because then like you'll go use it, but the $5,000 makes more sense to me than haggling over 2. Because $5,000 to me, I think that makes a little bit more sense if it's within that gap. You have a candidate, and that's why I say clear communication throughout. We have candidates that all of a sudden, they want $10,000, $15,000 more. If you came to me and said, I didn't realize there was global travel, it wasn't clear in the posting, and it's my mistake, maybe that evolved over the conversations. That's why we do a lot of face-to-face interviews, and I meet the candidate at the end and say, did anything change? That makes sense, right? Because there's a consistency there. Maybe we messed up in the job description. Maybe you learned something new. There's an on-call. I got to work on weekends. Great. But that number is going to play a big role into me about what are your motivators here? Is it $5,000 more because you have to work 1 Saturday a month? Oh, I get that. Or I'm losing 3 weeks of vacation at my current company. You offer 2 weeks. Can we talk about that? So really, I'll tell a candidate, I understand your approach. It's fact-based. It's data-based. I can take that to a manager. I can't take because I want $2,000 because it gets me to a round number, and my uncle told me I should ask for that because I'm worked out on Glassdoor. I can't take that to a hiring manager because they'll ask me what am I thinking, and I might have to look for another job. So
That's a really terrible uncle.
yeah. And this uncle don't take advice anymore. So yeah, thank you though. That was a good point.
So if when you're applying you do have to put, if there's a field for your current salary, for graduate students, like I get a stipend somewhere under $30,000, but like your package is $80-ish thousand, right? Because the school's paying for your tuition and your health fee and et cetera. And so I've gotten really mixed reviews about which number I should put, and so I just wanted to hear your opinion.
Leave it blank.
Yeah, put 0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, like, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I had where I was before, we asked for salary, and like 75% of people put 0. And I was like,
zero,
that's a bummer because I have to call and ask them, but I mean, I'm gonna have to call and talk to you anyways, so, you know, it's, and if people do put salaries in there, I most of the time don't believe them. Because, you know, it's just like you're sitting there, you're having this, you're kind of like, well, what number do I put? So it's usually not a realistic picture of where you are anyway.
And most systems are developed that they're looking for a numerical field there, so a little trick there is put the zeros in. If you put NA, the system's going to say, that doesn't work, I don't know what that is. Most talent systems, this is why we don't ask for it anymore. Because most, and I understand government has to, I totally understand that they'll put the range. If you ask the candidate for it, again, we might not even believe you. I haven't had that conversation with you yet. I don't know, I would put the zeros in.
And I would say too, any company that you want to work for ethically is not going to take advantage of the fact that you put $30,000 in there. If we hire a postdoc, everyone at 50 and you're putting in 30, we're not going to like clap our hands and go, ooh, we just got one for 30.
Right. It does us no good. Our internal data gets really hurt by that too, because as Bob was saying, we also use internal metrics when we hire someone. We use market data and internal data. If I hire someone at $30,000, the rest of everybody's at 90, I drove down the average and drove down the value. It's like housing kind of, right? I just drove down the value of all these other people in an aggregate, an average. I always tell my managers, that hurts us too. And if there's a company out there that's trying to get you for that, don't work there.
Plus the new law is the minimum now is $47,746 for an exempt level job. So nobody's going to hire you less than that anyway. So yeah, for the new FLSA law. Correct.
Yeah, and for us, you know, we'll post the range that we are able to pay you, but we don't care what you're making now, unless you know after you're offered a job, that's when that superior qualifications would come into play. So yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and if you are talking with multiple companies at one time, which I hope you all are, for you guys, if you're active in an offer process or active in an interview process, share that with the recruiter and let them know kind of what's going on. And be honest. If another company is offering you $5,000 more, and just have an open dialogue with them, keep us in the loop. I tell candidates that's one of the first things I tell them, and I ask them, what's going on in your application process? Where are you? If you're graduating from school, it's really understandable that you're going to be active with multiple companies. But let us know, because that helps us be a better advocate for you. I know if I have somebody who's active with another company, I will try to move them through the process a little quicker, because I don't want to lose a competitive advantage on our side and not be able to get you as a great candidate because we're dragging our feet, or we don't have any idea that this other company is going on. And that's only going to service you. It's going to help me. It's going to give me a kick in the pants to move you through quicker, learn more about what you're looking for, learn what they're offering, and our job is similar to sales in that we want to, we need to know the whole picture of what's going on with you so we can make sure that we're, getting you all the information and getting you if we want to.
And it helps us. It helps us out too, because if at the end, to your point, if we get to make you an offer and all of a sudden you're like, well, I have this other offer, and we're all the way at the end of the process, as recruiters, as HR professionals, to my business partners, I look a little silly for almost not knowing that, because then the manager's going to be like, I could have interviewed 5 other people, but I kind of paused because this person was so great. So you're kind of burning a bridge. And in a lot of industries, it's a small world. And even in our company, we have different divisions that hire people and they transfer around. To your point earlier, bigger companies have different recruiters that support different organizations. Well, we talk, and we might know that. And I don't think you're doing yourself very well by not just being consistent. And again, it's another data point. They have an offer $5,000 more from this company. It's not emotional. It's a data point I can give to my data folks. We're a data company, so our managers appreciate the bullet points that we're submitting when we go for offer approval. Sometimes those have to go to an executive. An executive, just like a resume, is going to look at my email for 10 seconds. It's got to be bullet, 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 why do I want to do it? So I'm going to say it is over the norm, but they have 3 other offers from this company, that company. It also kind of makes you look pretty cool, right? You're marketing yourself. So it's like, how come when I'm in a relationship, I always meet people, but when I'm not, that whole thing? It's the same thing. You have 3 interviews when it rains, it pours. So we're going to be like, wow, all these companies like them. They're doing something right. So I think that way, at least, if you got 3 other offers, you're doing something good. So.
Well, on that very positive note, I
almost got elbowed.
Thank all our panelists for being so generous with their time. Please join me in a round of applause for I know we've run a little bit over time, but if anyone is able to stick around and answer a few questions afterwards, we would be delighted to have you do so. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.